Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to episode 3 of Design Over Time. This is a series where we talk about just about any design topic that's related to game design that comes by in my everyday daily life. I make a video every day and you guys get to come along for the journey. So today's episode, we will be discussing a fix that I have for the competitive Pokemon battling format. If you don't know anything about Pokemon, then you can check out an article series that I wrote on my blog, which I'll show you the hard copy of right here. This is a hard copy, just 1/3 of my entire blog that I printed out. I started this blog a long time ago, but a while back I wrote an article series on, you guessed it, Pokemon. And this is a pretty long article series. It covers everything from what Pokemon is, how it came about, to its battling design, some interesting suggestions that I had for improving its design in various specific aspects. So if you don't know anything about Pokemon, I highly suggest reading this series. I even interview a couple of competitive battlers and I get their take on it. It's about this many pages, if you will. But yeah, check that out. I'll drop the link down into the description because all of this material is online and you can check that out anytime. Watch out, Snivy. So we look at the Bulbapedia entry. It says the sleep condition causes a Pokemon to be unable to make a move. In generations 5 and 6, Pokemon close their eyes when they're asleep and their movement slows down all. Yay, nice feedback. But in general, sleep means you can't do anything, and that makes it one of the most powerful status conditions in the game and also the most controversial. But you know, even being asleep, even losing one turn in a game like Pokemon could be absolutely catastrophic in terms of surviving the match or competitive viability. I mean, if you give your opponent just one free turn, they could set up on you, they can work up, make their Pokemon more powerful. There's all kinds of bad things that can happen. So in a competitive game like this, every turn is precious. So now we can hop over and take a look at Smogon's official rules, clauses, and ban lists. And the biggest difference, I say, between competitive battling VGCs and the 6v6 style battling that most fans do in simulators is this sleep clause right here. So basically, you cannot put more than one Pokemon to sleep at a time. I'm going to show you a few examples of what I mean by how powerful sleep can be.
Yep, okay, predicted a switch, good. Abdallah King! Ah!
So at this point in the match, this Breloom comes down, and as you can see, both players still have all 6 of their Pokemon. There's 6 Pokeballs up here and 6 down here, so it's still very early in the match. And single-handedly, this battler, uses a move called Spore, which has a 100% sleep rate. It's a very rare move, but very effective and devastating, especially on a relatively fast Pokemon like Breloom. Puts its opponents to sleep, and then he proceeds to set up, as they say. So in this case, he creates a substitute so that even if his opponent wakes up, the opponent cannot directly attack his Breloom before getting through the substitute. So it's a little bit of added defense. And from there, he proceeds to Focus Punch, which is a really strong move. Takes out his opponent here. Rating live, but I'll show you. So one-shots Quagsire. One-shots the Rotom. Still behind the substitute. Still very safe position. Sylveon, this player cannot one-shot, so he uses Spore. Puts Sylveon to sleep. And because Breloom is so fast and there's no sleep clause or anything like that, Sylveon has to take at least one turn to sleep. Now Sylveon can wake up in this next turn, but not before Breloom attacks, and then there's still a substitute, so it's just a really bad situation. That's Sylveon's second turn of sleep. There's really nothing the opposing player can do with this kind of setup, against this kind of setup. Oh, in the match. Victory. So with one Pokemon, this player single-handedly took out this opposing player's team. So that's a really dangerous thing. It may not have been the strongest player, but still, this is the fear that everybody has when dealing with sleep. These are all the moves that can put people to sleep. Dark Void, it really only can be done by 2 Pokemon, and one is an Uber, so we don't worry too much about Dark Void. And its accuracy is 80%. Grass Whistle, 55% accurate. Hypnosis, low accuracy as well, 60. Lovely Kiss, 75% accurate. That's kind of a new move. Relic Song, which is on a legendary Pokemon, so you don't see this very much. Can put people to sleep. It's 100% accurate. Jeez. And then there's Rest. You put yourself to sleep to heal, but that's kind of a different case altogether. Secret Power is rare, but it's 100% if you can get the right conditions. Sing, 55%. Sleep Powder, one of the most accurate sleeping moves that are available to the most Pokemon. 75% accurate. Roar is the same way, it's 100%, but only a few Pokemon in the game have this, including Breloom. We're mainly talking about Spore and Sleep Powder, because those are the most common moves that you see in most competitive games. So, design space wise, as I just sort of went over, sleep moves generally lack accuracy, and that's supposed to help balance them. So you take a risk using a sleep move that puts opponents to sleep. And accuracy is not the worst thing to be your only drawback for a move. There are plenty of moves in the game that increase your accuracy, like Hone Claws. So there are ways to mitigate some of the negative effects of accuracy. So we're really talking about what happens when you fall asleep, because people will find a way to make sure you fall asleep if they're going for a sleep-based game plan. Another interesting thing about sleep, as far as the design space goes and the balance of things, is the most reliable sleep moves are generally used by grass Pokemon, and grass Pokemon are not so good for attacking or defending compared to other types like water or fire. Design space wise, I called this a wrinkle. So this is an article I wrote on Critical Gaming a long time ago. So this article talks about why when you're building out your design space and you're trying to make things interesting and balanced, that making everything have the same amount of pros and cons is not necessarily a good thing. And there's a concept called a wrinkle, where some things have pros or cons that aren't evenly distributed or represented in the other elements in that set. So if you want to check that out, the article's there. I even talk about Mega Man. So yeah, grass Pokemon are not the best offensively and defensively. And what makes grass Pokemon so unique is that they have a wide range of stats affecting moves. They have access to Poison Powder, Stun Spore, Sleep Powder, and Leech Seed. And all four of those moves can be highly effective depending on the opponent you're fighting. So that really makes grass Pokemon versatile in a way that fire and water types are not. And that little wrinkle is really interesting, but in the case of Smogon rolls, if you ban sleep, or you introduce a sleep clause and it makes putting Pokemon to sleep a little harder, then you pretty much take away one of the primary unique aspects of grass types, that they have access to these sleep moves and that they have this versatility by using a variety of statuses on these Pokemon. So the only thing you can do when fighting Pokemon and strategy that like to put you to sleep is you can always hope for a first turn awake. So there's a minimum of one turn that you're asleep, and if the other Pokemon is faster than you and they put you to sleep before you can act, the next turn you always have an opportunity to wake up and then attack immediately. And this effectively nullifies any turns of advantage they were trying to get by putting you to sleep and doing stuff while you're fast asleep. So there's always the hope of a lucky first turn wake, but on average you'll get more 2 turns of sleep, and hopefully you never get a 3-turn sleep, but it's possible. So there's a little bit of variance and randomness there. So just being bold and staying in, you may not have any negative effects from being put to sleep at all. You can switch in a Pokemon that already has a status. So if you have one status in Pokemon, you can't be double statused. That's always a good thing. It then creates a block, if you will, status blocking. You can use held items that cure sleep. There's a Chesto Berry that cures sleep, or a Lum Berry that cures any status that you get immediately, so that's always interesting. For 2 of the most common and reliable sleep moves, Spore and Sleep Powder, grass-type Pokemon are unaffected. This is a new change that they added in Generation 6. Using team-supporting moves like Hill Bell or Uproar in doubles battles, you can inflict yourself with the status, and that effectively blocks anything else from statusing you. There's always Taunt and Substitute, so if you're faster, you can use these moves that put up a wall in the case of Substitute, that you can't be status through a Substitute, or if you taunt them, they can't use any moves but attacking moves, so that effectively counters their ability to use a sleep-inducing move. You can use a move called Sleep Talk, and it randomly has a chance that when you're asleep, you can use one of your moves randomly. Or you can use a Pokemon with a sleep-resistant ability. There's many different abilities that can counter sleep or other statuses. So those are your options. They're arranged by most likely to least likely. It's really hard to have a very specific move set or Pokemon with an ability to stop sleep, because you just don't know when your opponent's going to try to put you to sleep, which opponents are going for that strategy in the first place, or what. So it's much more reliable to try to rely on playing around it rather than building a specific counter strategy around it that involves specific abilities or moves. So here is where we discuss changes to the way sleep is designed. And I really think that sleep really could use a change. It's still too powerful. I mean, obviously for competitive players in the Shmogon community and other competitive battlers online, they introduce a sleep clause because they really don't want to deal with having your whole team put to sleep and being swept by such a simple strategy. It really restricts what the game is. It really reduces counters and counterplay in interesting situations. And that's why they put the clause in there in the first place, to keep things interesting and moving. And that's something that we can evaluate. So one idea is you can wake up faster when you take damage if you're asleep. So let's say they put you to sleep and you're like, oh no, I don't want to be asleep for the full 3 turns. Well, if they hit you that next turn, let's say you have a significant chance of waking up. Then that'll give you some incentives to switch in sleeping Pokemon into attacks that you resist, especially. It gives you some incentives to stay in and take the hits and try to wake up on that first turn sleep or the next turn of sleep. It puts a little bit more advantage into the status Pokemon and status players' side that help them fight back. And if the opposing player wants to keep you asleep as much as possible, then it gives them a little bit more incentive to either switch Pokemon on you while you're asleep or use setup moves to maximize their advantage time. It's a simple idea, because I just think it's kind of goofy if your Pokemon's sitting there fast asleep and they're getting wailed on and then they don't wake up like that. Fictionally, that really doesn't make a lot of sense to me, so I kind of like that idea. The next idea is once you wake up from sleep, you could get a new pseudo status, a ZZZ status, and this would prevent the Pokemon from going back to sleep or getting any other statuses. So this idea is you can hope for a first turn wake up, which would effectively nullify any losses of turns, so that'd be kind of cool. But if you survive and you stick it out and you get your Pokemon to wake up, you then have a status blocker that has no other negative effects. The trouble is, this adds a whole new rule to Pokemon. You'd have to explain it to people, and then you'd have to specially tune moves like Rest to allow players to put themselves back to sleep. And what do you do if you have the ZZZ status? Do you get it from using Rest on yourself? And it's just kind of like, well, there's some nitpicky things you have to work out. I'm not too much of a fan of the ZZZ status. The idea that I think is most interesting is, in fact, what I call Restful Sleep. So in Pokemon, there's a move called Rest, and it's been around since Gen 1. You basically put yourself to sleep, and when you do that, you get all your health back on that turn you fall asleep, and you get rid of all statuses that you have. So if you're burned, paralyzed, if you are poisoned, then all that goes away, and you pretty much get a new Pokemon, like a completely refreshed Pokemon. The only downside is when you use Rest, you sleep for an additional 2 turns after you use the move. So you have to figure out how to either get rid of that status or ride the storm out, and hopefully your Pokemon won't be too damaged when it wakes back up. That's the interesting trade-off for Rest, and it's been the same since Gen 1, so that's pretty cool how that move, at least, nobody thinks is broken. So when you get inflicted with a sleep status in this new version, I wanted it to be kind of like Rest, where you get some health back for being asleep. So when they put you to sleep, every turn that you're asleep, let's say you get 1/4 of your health back every turn when the little Z's come up. This creates many more counters and therefore many more interesting choices around using sleep status. Choices that are all accessible to all Pokemon, no matter what moves they have or abilities they have, and you can play around this without having to build a specific anti-sleep team. And I think that'll just be sort of a refreshing change to the way people normally play around sleep and counter it. Yeah, so to illustrate the difference between Restful Sleep in terms of interesting choices and how it actually would change the strategies available to you in a match, I drew up this interesting chart for you to look at. Let's take a look. Alright, so on the left side is the original Pokemon's rules, on the middle is my suggestion, on the right side is the Smogon Sleep Clause competitive battling format. So we'll start with the original rules. And this area right here represents what happens on a single double-blind turn. Your opponent has access to these 4 options. They have to pick one. You pretty much have access to these 2 lower options. You have to pick one. If the line connecting to 2 options is red, it's bad for you. If the line connecting them is yellow, it could be a toss-up. You could win or lose advantages just depending on what moves or what options are picked. And if the line connecting them is green, it's good for you. So if you are an experienced Pokemon player, I suggest taking some time and looking at every single one of these connections on the chart and really thinking through what the pros and cons are in any given situation. you can see if your ideas of what the advantages and disadvantages are match up with mine. But if you're not too serious of a Pokemon player, all you need to do to figure out what's happening in this chart is to look at the colors. The more red that you see, those decisions are bad for you, and the more green that you see, those are your good decisions. Now, red and green are super polarizing. Those are the really good options and the bad options. But what we really want to see is yellow. So look at the various points on the graph and see how much yellow there is. One of the main differences between the original Pokemon's rolls and the Smogon's rolls is that my version, the Restful Sleep version, has a lot more yellow, which creates a lot more interesting decisions and a lot more opportunity for reads and counters and loops to happen within the gameplay. So instead of just picking one red or green option and either losing big or winning big, there's a lot more middle ground. And it's good to have some green and some red because you always want to reward players for making the really good risky read, but for the most part, most of the decisions are going to be interesting and feeding back into all the other interesting decisions that you make in a match instead of pretty much locking things down once sleep starts entering the equation.
Or without making a specific Smogon roll that prevents two of your Pokemon from going to sleep, and without putting you in this terrible losing sleep cycle, one change to the way sleep work adds so many more interesting decisions to the battle strategy. And now you don't have to formulate a specific team to get it to work. You just play with what you have, you play with the Pokemon you have, and there's many more opportunities for situations to dynamically change without necessarily having one player lose a whole bunch of advantages or the other player getting a whole bunch of advantages. These yellow lines are super important. So this version, this change I'm suggesting on the board, on paper at least, looks a lot better than Smogon's rule, and it looks a lot better than the original Pokemon's design. So, hey guys, so if you play Pokemon, let me know what you think of this rule. Let me know if you can modify your own version of Pokemon and see if it works, because I'd love to hear how it actually plays in actual competition or when people actually test it out. I mean, so this is just one suggestion to a change that fixes a really interesting problem by addressing it from a strategic point of view, from a balanced point of view, and trying to make the rule as elegantly as possible. I think all these things are important considerations when suggesting changes. It's not about just looking at one thing you don't like, one sort of outcome, one effect you don't like. It's about looking at the entire game system, the entire design space, the entire metagame, and trying to figure out how few things you can change to preserve all the things you like about it and get rid of some of the things you don't like about it. So yeah, let me know what you think. My name's Kirby Kid. I go by @KirbyKid on Twitter. You can follow Design Oriented and subscribe to this channel for these daily Design Over Time videos. Leave your comments down below or get to me on Twitter, and I will answer them by Friday or the last video in the week. So yeah, and the last thing I want to say is, you know, if you're a Pokemon fan like me, you probably watch the show or, you know, do other things besides playing the single Pokemon game, check out this article that my brother and I wrote on Design Oriented blog a while ago. It looks a little something like this. It's where we talk about this idea of characterization through mechanics, and we compare the actual game design of Pokemon versus how battles are depicted in the anime TV show. And you can see all these cool moving GIFs here. We break down the moves, we break down the battle move by move. We even simulate some of the battles in Smogon's Battle Simulator, and we talk about if this battle in the anime is even possible. And it's just a really interesting way to take all these detailed ways of looking at games and TV shows and trying to find some middle ground to hopefully improve your enjoyment of both things. So yeah, let me know what you think, and we will see you on the next episode of Design Over Time.